That night started like so many others that I barely noticed it. I remember checking the clock at work and sighing quietly, not because anything was wrong, but because my body was tired in that deep, familiar way that comes from repetition. Long hours, same routine, same building, same end-of-day exhaustion that made my thoughts slow and my movements automatic.
It was a work night.
Nothing special, nothing dramatic. The building still hummed softly around me, machines winding down, lights buzzing faintly overhead, the distant echo of footsteps from someone leaving earlier than I was. I had stayed late before, many times, enough times that it no longer felt risky or unusual. I told myself I'd finish just one more thing. That's always how it starts. One more task, one more file, one more cleanup. I wanted to leave the place tidy, organized like I always did. It gave me a strange sense of control, ending the day properly, even if the day itself had been long and draining. Outside, I could see the darkness settling through the windows. Streetlights flickered on one by one, casting pale yellow circles onto the pavement. Cars passed less frequently now. The city was slowly exhaling, slipping into night. I wasn't afraid. If anything, I felt calm, detached, wrapped in routine. I packed my things slowly, methodically. Bag over my shoulder. Jacket zipped halfway. Keys checked twice, another habit I didn't question. My mind was already drifting toward home.
Toward food. Toward rest.
I remember thinking how quiet everything had become. Not an alarming quiet, just empty. The kind of silence that comes after people leave, after voices fade, after the day officially ends. I turned off the last light in my workspace and stood there for a second longer than usual. Not because I sensed danger, but because my body felt heavy, like it wanted to pause before moving again. If only I knew. I would think later. If only I had known that this ordinary night, this completely unremarkable moment, was the last time I would feel truly safe for a long while. I locked the door behind me and began walking toward the exit, already halfway gone in my thoughts. And somewhere deep inside, without understanding why, a quiet voice whispered, "Pay attention." I ignored it. I hadn't planned to stay that late. It started as a normal shift, and then one small delay turned into another. A coworker asked for help. A task took longer than expected. By the time I looked up again, the clock had moved farther than I liked. Overtime. Unpaid. Unremarkable. Familiar. One by one, people began to leave. I noticed it without really noticing it. Chairs scraping back, lockers closing, quick goodbyes echoing briefly before disappearing down the hallway. See you tomorrow. Night. Drive safe. The sounds faded. The building changed after that. It always did. During the day, the place felt alive. Footsteps overlapped. Doors opened and closed. Voices bounced off the walls. But at night, the building felt hollow, like a shell that had been emptied and forgotten. The silence crept in gradually. At first, it was just the absence of conversation. Then the hum of machines felt louder than it should have. The buzz of fluorescent lights overhead seemed sharper, almost irritating. Every small sound stood out. The click of my keyboard, the rustle of paper, my own breathing. I told myself it was fine. I had stayed late before. Dozens of times. Maybe more. The building had security. Cameras. Locks. All the things that were supposed to mean safety. That's what I told myself, anyway. Still, I found myself pausing more often. Listening. Not because I heard something, but because I didn't. I finished my work slowly, dragging out the last few minutes without realizing it. Fatigue weighed on my body, dulling my thoughts. My shoulders ached. My eyes burned from staring at screens all day. Just finish and go home, I told myself. Another voice answered quietly. Be careful. I ignored that one too. When I finally stood up, the chair made a loud sound against the floor, and it startled me. I laughed softly at myself, embarrassed even though no one was there to see it. Get a grip, I muttered under my breath. I gathered my things and walked down the hallway. Motion sensor lights flicked on as I passed, then switched off again behind me, plunging the space back into darkness. That should have bothered me. It didn't. I assumed security had already locked certain areas. I assumed someone was watching through cameras somewhere. I assumed routine meant protection. Fatigue has a way of making assumptions feel reasonable. At the main exit, I stopped again, hand hovering over the door handle. For a moment, I just stood there, listening to the building breathe around me. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. No movement. Just silence. I pushed the door open and stepped into the night, unaware that isolation wasn't behind me anymore. It was following me. The night air hit me the moment I stepped outside, cool, sharp, and unexpectedly heavy. I paused just beyond the door, letting it close behind me with a soft metallic click. The parking area was dimly lit, the yellow glow of streetlights stretching thin shadows across the ground. My car sat where I had left it, alone at the far end, surrounded by empty spaces. That's when I heard it. Not loud. Not obvious. Just wrong. A sound that didn't belong to the night. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a trick of tired ears adjusting to silence. A faint shuffle. A soft scrape. Like a shoe brushing against concrete somewhere behind me. I turned slightly, scanning the area. Nothing. No one's here. I told myself quietly. Everyone's gone. I took a few steps forward. The sound came again. This time, closer. My chest tightened. I told myself it could be anything. Wind. An animal. Someone passing by outside the gate. The mind fills gaps when it's tired, I reasoned. Fatigue creates ghosts. Still, my pace slowed. As I walked, I noticed something else, something small, but unsettling. One of the security lights near the side entrance was off. It was usually on. Always on. I had passed it hundreds of times and never once seen it dark. Maintenance probably, I thought. I hated how quickly I dismissed it. Another sound, metal this time. A soft clink, like keys touching or a door being nudged. I stopped completely. The silence pressed in around me, thick and uncomfortable. I could hear my own heartbeat now, loud enough to drown out everything else. You're overreacting, I told myself. You're just tired. I glanced toward the building again. The windows reflected the streetlights, dark and empty. No movement. No figures. No reason to be afraid. And yet, that feeling wouldn't go away. It settled low in my stomach, heavy and cold. A warning, without words. A sensation I had felt before in smaller moments, crossing a dark street, sensing eyes on me, but never this strong. I adjusted my grip on my bag, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. The space between me and my car felt longer now. The darkness between the lights seemed deeper, more deliberate. I almost turned back. Almost. But logic stepped in, firm and reassuring. What are you afraid of? This is your workplace. You know this place. Fear doesn't always arrive screaming. Sometimes it whispers. I took another step, then another. And as I reached the middle of the parking area, I felt it, the unmistakable sense of being watched. Not imagined.
Felt.
My skin prickled. The hair on my arms rose beneath my jacket. I resisted the urge to look over. My shoulder again, afraid of confirming what I might see or not see. Just get to the car, I muttered. I pressed the key fob, listening for the familiar click. The sound echoed far too loudly. And in that echo, I knew something was wrong. I had ignored the signs. And whatever was out there now knew exactly where I was. The door shut behind me, and with it, the last thin layer of safety disappeared. The sound echoed briefly, then dissolved into the night, leaving me standing alone in a darkness that suddenly felt intentional, like it had been waiting for me. The parking lot stretched out in every direction, wide and empty, its silence louder than any noise I had left inside the building. No voices. No engines. No footsteps. Just me. The street beyond a lot was just as deserted. The usual hum of traffic was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness that made the air feel heavier with every breath I took. Even the city seemed to have pulled away, leaving this small pocket of emptiness behind. The weather didn't help. The wind picked up without warning, sharp and cold, cutting through my jacket and settling deep into my bones. A few drops of rain began to fall, slow at first, then steadier, darkening the ground and turning the pavement slick. The streetlights flickered faintly as the rain passed through their glow, making shadows stretch and shrink in unnatural ways. I tightened my grip on my bag and walked faster. Each step felt exposed, like I was crossing a stage with unseen eyes watching from the darkened seats. The distance between me and my car seemed to grow instead of shrink. The further I moved from the building, the more aware I became of how alone I truly was. No coworkers, no security guard, no late-night passerby, just empty space and the sound of my own breathing. I glanced behind me again. Nothing.
Still nothing.
And yet the unease refused to leave. The wind howled softly between the buildings now, slipping through alleys and corners I couldn't see, carrying with it the sense that I was no longer just walking through the night. I was inside it, wrapped by it, vulnerable within it. I felt suddenly small, insignificant, like if something happened out here, no one would hear it, no one would come running, no one would even know where to start looking. That thought lodged itself in my chest and refused to move. This was a mistake, I whispered to myself. Staying late, trusting the routine, assuming safety because I always had before. The rain picked up again, pattering softly against my hood, masking the smaller sounds around me. Every footstep, my own or otherwise, blurred into the same rhythm. I hated that. I hated not being able to tell what belonged to me and what didn't. I reached the row where my car was parked and slowed down despite myself, dread crawling up my spine. The area was darker here. One of the lights overhead buzzed weakly, flickering like it was on the verge of giving up. I stood there for a moment, keys clenched in my hand, listening. The night listened back. That's when the realization hit me fully, not as fear, but as certainty. I wasn't just alone. I was unprotected. And whatever I had sensed earlier hadn't faded with distance. It had grown stronger, closer,
sharper.
I hurried toward my car, heart pounding now, rain soaking into my sleeves, every instinct screaming that stepping into this darkness had changed something. Once you leave the light, there's no guarantee you'll make it back the same way. And as I reached for the door handle, a cold thought crossed my mind. Exposure isn't about being seen. It's about being reachable. My fingers wrapped around the car handle and froze. Not because it was locked, because something felt wrong. The air changed. That's the only way I can describe it. The night, which had been distant and empty just moments before, suddenly felt closer, heavier, like it had leaned in without asking permission. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window, wide eyes, shallow breath, a stranger wearing my face. I told myself to stop overthinking. I pulled the handle. Nothing.
Locked.
Of course it was locked. It always was. But in that moment, the small inconvenience felt enormous. My hands trembled as I dug into my bag for my keys, metal clinking too loudly, echoing in the silence like an announcement. I'm here. That's when I heard it. Not a voice. Not footsteps. A sound so subtle I almost dismissed it, a soft scuff against pavement.
Slow.
Careless. Too deliberate to be accidental. My chest tightened. I stopped moving. The rain masked everything, turning the world into a blur of white noise, but beneath it, there it was again. Closer this time. Behind me? To my side? I couldn't tell. That uncertainty was worse than knowing. Every instinct told me not to turn around.
So I didn't.
I fumbled harder with the keys, breath coming fast now, fogging the glass. My hands felt clumsy, disconnected, like they belonged to someone else. One key slipped from my fingers and hit the ground. The sound was sharp, final. I crouched quickly to grab it, and that's when I saw the shadow. It stretched across the pavement near my feet, long and distorted by the flickering light overhead. It didn't move the way shadows should. It lingered, shifted slightly, as if whoever cast it had stopped just out of sight. My heart slammed so hard I thought it might give me away. I stood up slowly, keys clenched tight, every muscle screaming at me to run. But run where? The building was behind me, dark now, locked and lifeless. The street ahead was empty. No headlights. No movement.
No help.
I was exposed from every direction. "Hello," I said, my voice barely more than air. No answer. But the shadow moved. Just a fraction. That was enough. I shoved the key into the lock, missing the slot twice before it finally slid in. I twisted, yanked the door open, and nearly fell into the driver's seat. The door slammed shut with a force that shook the car. I locked it instantly.
Once. Twice.
3 times. My breathing was loud now, uncontrolled, filling the small space with panic. I stared straight ahead, afraid that if I looked to the side windows, I'd confirm what my mind was already screaming. The shadow passed the hood.
Slow.
Unhurried. Whoever it was didn't rush. That terrified me more than if they had. There was no desperation in their movement. No surprise. Just intent. My hands shook as I turned the key in the ignition. The engine coughed once. My heart dropped, then roared to life. Relief flooded me so suddenly I nearly cried. I threw the car into reverse. That's when a hand slammed onto the trunk. The sound was unmistakable. Flesh against metal. Close.
Real.
I screamed. I didn't look back.
I didn't hesitate.
I slammed the accelerator and tore out of the parking space, tires screeching against wet pavement. The hand disappeared from view as I sped toward the exit, rain streaking across the windshield like tears I hadn't yet allowed myself to shed. I didn't stop driving until the lights of the main road swallowed me whole. Even then, my heart kept racing. Because deep down, I knew something terrifying. The danger hadn't started when I heard the sound. It had started the moment I assumed I was safe, just because I was at work, just because it was familiar, just because nothing bad had happened before. And as I drove into the night, one thought stayed with me, cold and relentless. Survival isn't always about fighting back. Sometimes it's about escaping before the fight begins. I thought driving away would end it. I was wrong. The road ahead stretched long and empty, streetlights flashing past like silent witnesses, but my body hadn't gotten the message that I was moving. My heart was still trapped back in that parking lot, pounding like it was trying to break out of my chest. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached, knuckles white, wrists locked. I checked the mirrors.
Once. Twice.
Again. Every pair of headlights behind me felt too close. Every shadow between cars looked suspicious. My mind began racing faster than the engine, calculating possibilities I didn't want to imagine. If they followed me, if they memorized the car, if they're still nearby. The road narrowed ahead, construction barriers squeezing the lanes into one. Orange cones forced me to slow down. My breath caught in my throat. No escape route. No sudden turn. No place to pull over safely. No one else around. Just me, boxed in by concrete and darkness. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the radio, the rain, everything else. I felt the panic rise in waves, hot, dizzying, threatening to take control. I forced myself to breathe slowly, counting each inhale, each exhale, afraid that if I lost focus even for a second, fear would make the decisions for me.
Think. Stay calm.
Stay alive. I ran through scenarios in my head with brutal efficiency. What if the car stalled? What if someone stepped out in front of me? What if I had to stop at a red light and they pulled up beside me? My eyes darted constantly. Rearview mirror, side mirror, road ahead. My neck stiff, jaw clenched. I memorized every street sign, every open business, every place with light, knowing that light meant witnesses and witnesses meant safety. Then the traffic light ahead turned red. I slowed, heart sinking. The car behind me rolled closer. Too close. My stomach twisted. I could feel the fear settle deep in my gut now, cold and heavy. My mind jumped to the worst outcomes without asking permission, being boxed in, dragged out, unheard, unseen. "This is how it happens," a voice whispered inside me. "This is how people disappear." The light felt like it would never change. I rehearsed my next moves in my head. Doors locked. Foot hovering over the accelerator. If I had to, I would run the light. If I had to, I would crash. If I had to, I would do anything to avoid stopping completely. The car behind me shifted lanes. My chest seized. But it didn't stop next to me. It passed. Just another driver. Just another stranger who had no idea they had been standing on the edge of my fear. The light turned green. I drove. Not fast. Not slow. Controlled. Alert. Still calculating. Still trapped in survival mode long after the danger might have passed. Because once your body believes you're cornered, it doesn't let go easily. By the time I reached a well-lit intersection filled with late-night traffic and open stores, my hands were shaking again. Not from fear this time, but from the delayed shock of knowing how close I had felt to something irreversible. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, surrounded by people, by light, by life. And yet I had never felt more aware of how thin the line between safety and disaster truly was. That night taught me something I would never forget. Fear doesn't wait for proof. Survival doesn't wait for certainty. Sometimes, all you have is instinct and the will to keep moving before the fear catches up to you. I wish I could say the fear faded once I reached the light. It didn't. It followed me, quietly, invisibly, sliding into my thoughts, tightening around my chest, turning every sound into a threat. My body stayed locked in survival mode, senses stretched to their breaking point, as if danger could return at any second, and I had to be ready.
Then I saw it. Headlights.
The same ones. I can't explain how I knew. They could have belonged to any car, but something deep inside me reacted before logic had a chance to speak. The vehicle behind me slowed when I slowed, turned when I turned, kept just enough distance to avoid drawing attention. My stomach dropped. The air in the car felt thick, suffocating. I rolled the window down slightly, desperate for oxygen, but the cold night air only sharpened my awareness. Every sound came at me all at once: the hum of the engine, the tick of the signal light, the slap of rain against glass, my own heartbeat pounding so loudly it felt external. Time began to warp. Seconds stretched into minutes. The space between intersections felt endless. I couldn't tell if I had been driving for 5 minutes or 50. My thoughts splintered, overlapping and frantic. Don't panic. Stay visible. Don't lead them home. I took random turns, testing the theory I didn't want confirmed. Left.
Right.
Another left. The car followed. My throat tightened. This was no coincidence anymore. A flash of movement in my side mirror. Someone leaning forward inside the vehicle, as if trying to get a better look at me. The sight sent a jolt of pure terror through my spine. My foot pressed harder on the accelerator before my mind even gave the order. The engine whined. The headlights stayed with me. I felt hunted. At a red light, the car pulled closer, so close I could no longer see the road between us. My doors were locked, but suddenly that felt meaningless. Thin barriers against whatever intent was sitting just feet away. A horn blared. Not from them, from another car behind us. The sound made me flinch violently, heart leaping into my throat. The world felt too loud, too bright, too fast. Sensory overload crashed over me in waves. My hands shook so badly, I had to grip the wheel with my forearms just to keep control. The light turned green. I didn't hesitate. I ran it. I weaved through traffic, ignoring the rules I had trusted my whole life. Survival rewrote everything. Signals didn't matter. Courtesy didn't matter. All that mattered was distance. My mind shifted into something raw and primitive. Escape. Evade.
Live.
I scanned for safe places, police stations, hospitals, anywhere with cameras and people. My vision tunneled, locking onto pools of light ahead like lifelines. I pulled into a crowded gas station without signaling, nearly clipping the curb. The headlights hesitated, then drove past. I sat there, engine running, chest heaving, hands numb, watching until the taillights disappeared completely. Only then did my body begin to understand that the immediate threat might be gone. And that's when the shaking really started. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and sobbed, not loudly, not neatly, but in broken gasps that tore out of me without permission. The terror I had been holding back flooded through all at once. That night changed the way I experience fear. Because the most dangerous threats aren't always physical. Sometimes they never touch you. They stalk your senses, twist time, hijack your instincts, and leave you forever aware of how quickly the ordinary can become lethal. And even now, long after that night ended, my body still remembers. It remembers how survival feels. Remembers sitting in the driver's seat, chest heaving, hands still trembling on the wheel, staring down the road ahead. Every instinct screamed at me, move. Don't stop. Don't look back. But instinct alone wasn't enough anymore. I had to make a choice. And I knew it would decide everything. A fight? I could barely breathe, let alone confront whoever had been following me. There was no weapon, no backup, no way to predict what they would do. Any attempt at confrontation could be the end of me. Flee? That seemed like the obvious option. Keep driving until the city swallowed me, until I reached lights, until I reached somewhere crowded, somewhere public. But where? The streets all looked the same, dark and silent, stretching endlessly with no guarantees. Every turn could lead me deeper into danger. Hide? I considered it for a split second. Pull off into a shadowed alley, crouch low, hope they didn't find me. But hiding meant waiting, freezing, letting them close the distance. That could trap me for good. My mind raced, splitting into possibilities, probabilities, every scenario more terrifying than the last. And then, in that moment of raw fear, one thought crystallized, sharp and urgent. This choice decides everything. I didn't have time to overthink. Hesitation could kill me. I had to act. I scanned the streets, searching for any flicker of light, any place that might offer a chance. A small convenience store with its neon sign glowing red. Crowds of late-night pedestrians near a gas station. A hospital just a few blocks away. I remembered seeing the lights from the parking lot on my way to work earlier. Decision made. I slammed the car into gear, pressing the accelerator hard, tires biting into the wet pavement. I veered sharply toward the neon glow of the convenience store, heart hammering, vision narrowing into a tunnel of urgency. Every second stretched painfully long. Every shadow seemed alive. Every footstep echoing inside my mind like a countdown. And as I approached the store, I realized there would be no turning back. No hesitating, no second-guessing. This one move could mean the difference between survival and disaster. I forced myself to focus on breathing, on steering, on the lights ahead, anything to anchor me. Behind me, I imagined the presence still lingering, still watching, still waiting to see what I would do. I could feel it, even if I couldn't see it clearly. I gripped the wheel tighter. This is it, I whispered under my breath. One choice. One chance. Don't fail. And then I ran the last dark stretch, heading straight for visibility, for life, for hope, praying my instincts were enough to carry me through. I didn't know what I expected when I reached the neon glow of the convenience store. Safety, maybe, or at least a pause from the relentless terror. What I found instead was a narrow thread of hope, almost too small to see. As I swerved into the parking lot, tires squealing slightly on the wet pavement, the car behind me faltered. I couldn't see clearly in the rain-streaked mirrors, but I sensed it, slight hesitation, a pause that shouldn't have been there. My stomach twisted, a mixture of dread and relief flooding me at once. I didn't wait to analyze it. I jumped out of the car, heart hammering, lungs burning, and ran toward the entrance, the rain hammering my back like an urgent drumbeat. I could hear a movement behind me, a door slamming, a shout. I couldn't tell, and I didn't dare look back. Inside, the warmth hit me first. Artificial, fluorescent, yet comforting. Shelves stocked with food, the hum of a refrigeration unit, and most importantly, people. Real, ordinary people, oblivious to the danger that had stalked me outside. I ran to the cashier, nearly knocking over a display of candy bars, and gasped out something incoherent. The clerk, startled, looked up at me, eyes widening. "Are you okay?" she asked. I shook my head, trying to force words through my throat. "Someone following me car." As I spoke, the car outside moved again, and for a horrifying moment, I feared they might come closer, follow me in, or worse. But then, something changed, a sound, a misstep, a mistake I'll never know exactly. The car pulled away. I didn't see it leave. I just knew. Somehow, in some way, they had chosen or been forced to stop chasing me. That small, invisible shift in events was all I needed. I collapsed into a chair near the counter, shivering violently despite the warmth. My hands were wet, trembling so hard they knocked over a cup of bottled water. I couldn't speak, couldn't form coherent thoughts. The reality of survival hit me slowly, like water dripping onto a hot stone, painful, shocking, and impossible to ignore. The clerk called someone, another employee, maybe the manager, and stayed with me, offering a jacket, a water bottle, and quiet words I barely registered. I sank into myself, finally allowing the adrenaline to ebb slightly, replaced by the raw, hollow shock of what had just occurred. I realized then that I had survived. Somehow, by some fragile combination of instinct, speed, and luck, I had survived. But survival didn't erase the terror. It didn't erase the knowledge that mere moments before, everything could have ended differently. My hands still shook, my chest still raced, and my mind played over the night in fragments, disjointed and relentless. And even as I tried to calm myself, I knew something. This night would never leave me. Not fully. It had touched me in a way that would echo long after the danger was gone. I remember stepping outside the convenience store later that night, the rain still falling, cold and unrelenting. My legs felt like they weren't mine, trembling under every step. My body was exhausted, but more than that, it was numb. Numb to relief, numb to fear, numb to anything at all. Every sound, the dripping water, distant car engines, the hum of streetlights, felt unreal. My mind replayed the events over and over, like a broken recording I couldn't stop. How close I had come, how small and exposed I had been, how easily it could have ended differently. I felt the sting of minor cuts on my hands, probably from fumbling the car keys, and a bruise on my shoulder where I had slammed into the door in my panic. Pain registered weakly, but the emotional shock overpowered it. My whole body was still running on adrenaline, trembling even as exhaustion begged for release. I knew I needed help, but the thought of explaining everything, fast-moving, terrifying, almost unbelievable, made my throat tight. Who would understand? Who would believe me? A passerby noticed me shaking near the curb and approached carefully, asking if I was okay. I barely nodded, barely managed the words. They offered to call the police. Thank God. When the officers arrived, I tried to explain. The words came in halting bursts, breathless and uneven. The car, the pursuit, the rain, the shadows, the fear. I described the lights, the license plate, anything I could remember. But fragments of memory were all I had. Fragments that didn't make sense even to me yet. The officers were patient, professional, calm. They took notes, asked questions, repeated my statements to make sure they understood. But I could feel their doubt, subtle yet present. Not because they didn't care, but because the story was extraordinary. I didn't care about doubt. I was alive. That was enough. Yet, even sitting in the squad car, wrapped in a thin blanket they handed me, I felt raw, hollow, disconnected. Each bump in the road made my chest jump. Every red light made me tense, expecting danger to materialize from nowhere. Reality was returning slowly, reluctantly. I was alive, but alive in a way that was different. Everything felt sharper now, light, sound, touch. Every instinct was screaming at me to stay alert. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a seed had planted itself. The world wasn't safe. Not really. Not in the way I had believed. Even now, recounting it, I can feel that seed, buried deep, still growing, still watching. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Even after the police left me at my temporary shelter, after the warmth of blankets and the gentle reassurances from strangers, My mind refused to rest. Every time my eyes closed, the streets came back, the shadows, the slick pavement, the headlights closing in. Every heartbeat echoed like it belonged to someone else. I replayed it endlessly.
The car. The chase.
That frozen moment at the red light when I thought it was over. The instant relief when I made it into the store, and then the slow realization that what I had just survived was almost invisible in its randomness. Guilt settled over me like a fog. I shouldn't have stayed late. I shouldn't have gotten into that car. I should have been more careful, more aware, more something. I couldn't stop asking myself the what-ifs. What if I had hesitated? What if I had run into the wrong alley? What if someone had been waiting at the corner? My mind pulled me into endless loops of blame, looping like the spinning headlights I had seen in the rearview mirror. Fear of darkness became almost physical. I couldn't stay in one room for long without checking the locks, the windows, the doors. Every small sound made me jump. The creak of a floorboard, the distant howl of a car engine, the whisper of wind against glass. Shadows that would have been harmless before now seemed alive, breathing, watching. I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying strategies I hadn't thought to use, imagining different routes, different decisions. Every what if became another layer of terror, another knot in my chest. Even daylight didn't completely help. The world looked too bright, too open, too exposed. The streets were busy again, full of faces I didn't know, but the memory of empty, wet roads and distant, tracking headlights lingered like a shadow behind my eyes. I finally realized that survival wasn't just physical. It was mental. And that night, I discovered how heavy it could weigh on the mind when fear refuses to leave. Sleep wasn't just impossible. It felt dangerous, like closing my eyes would allow that night to reach in and claim me all over again. And so I stayed awake, waiting, watching, haunted by every heartbeat and every memory. The days after that night blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and unease. Physically, I was fine, just a few scrapes and bruises that healed quickly, but mentally, I felt fractured. My body returned to routine long before my mind did. At work, everything felt different. The office that had once been mundane now seemed claustrophobic. Every dark hallway, every quiet corridor reminded me of that night. Even the routine sounds, the hum of fluorescent lights, the shuffle of papers, the click of keyboards, triggered a subtle tension deep in my chest. My colleagues noticed my distraction, but I couldn't explain. How could I? Even I struggled to put the experience into words without it sounding like a story pulled from fiction. I started changing my habits, parking farther from the building, avoiding isolated streets, walking in clusters when possible, double-checking every lock, every door, every window. I couldn't trust the world the way I once had. I couldn't trust strangers, or even my own instincts. Trust issues seeped into other parts of life, too. Every interaction, every casual encounter, felt heavier, like the world was suddenly more dangerous than it had ever been. I questioned intentions. I questioned safety. I questioned myself. Routine became a survival tactic. I mapped the city streets in my mind, memorized safe spots, avoided shortcuts, and double-checked the timing of streetlights. A walk home that had once taken 10 minutes now felt like a calculated operation. Every choice carried weight. Every decision felt critical. Even nights at home were tense. Shadows moved differently, sounds carried differently, and sleep remained elusive. I couldn't shake the image of the headlights, the sound of rain against the windshield, the instinctive terror that had consumed me. The nights stretched long, and the days felt cautious. My life hadn't stopped, but it had changed. I was alive, yes, but survival had left a mark, one that no one could see, but that I felt in every heartbeat, in every cautious step, in every glance over my shoulder. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that night had altered me permanently. That while I could move forward, I would never forget. Even years later, I can feel that night. It never truly leaves. I wake sometimes in the middle of the night, heart hammering, eyes scanning the shadows of my room, half expecting to see headlights glaring through the window, half expecting the weight of fear to return like it did in that parking lot. It wasn't just a night of terror, it was a lesson written in adrenaline and instinct. I learned, painfully, that safety is never guaranteed. Familiarity doesn't equal protection. And assumptions can be fatal. That night taught me to pay attention, to respect the small warnings, to trust instincts I had ignored. It changed the way I move through the world, how I perceive it, how I weigh risk, and how I survive. I also learned about the fragility of life and the randomness of danger. One wrong turn, one split-second hesitation, and everything could have ended differently. That knowledge is a shadow I carry, not as a curse, but as a reminder. Life is precious, and vigilance is a kind of gratitude. The memory still haunts me, not because I failed, but because I survived. Because surviving left me with a permanent reminder of how quickly everything can change. A night that began like any other ended as the moment that changed everything. I can walk the streets now without immediate fear. I can live, laugh, and sleep again. But that night, the darkness, the shadows, the adrenaline, the terror, it is stitched into my memory, a permanent thread I can never fully untangle. It haunts me, yes, but it also reminds me of something more powerful. The will to survive is stronger than fear itself.